A luxury yacht sails across the vibrant turquoise waters of a tropical sea. On deck, a woman looks out at the horizon, feeling the weight of being fired from her job. She sits at the edge of the boat, cooling her feet in the crystal clear water. Looking down from the ledge, she sighs about how boring the beach can be compared to the comfort of home. She catches a glimpse of some eccentric performers entertaining the other passengers from under her hat. Sitting alone on the platform, she stares at her dead phone and wishes for a cold drink. Suddenly, a hand emerges from the waves and offers her a can of soda. She looks down in total shock to find a pink-haired mermaid floating right next to her. Her eyes bulge as she tries to process the impossible sight. The cheerful mermaid smiles warmly and holds the drink up for her to take. Panicked, the woman looks around, desperate to ensure no one else notices the mythical creature. The mermaid expertly pops the tab on the can with her thumb. With trembling hands, the woman accepts the drink, still unsure of what is happening. She stares at the can, wondering if this is some kind of elaborate hallucination or scam. The mermaid leans against the side of the boat, watching her with a sweet, blushing expression. Deciding to just go with it, the woman chugs the cold soda. A sudden shout from above startles her, causing her to spit the drink out in surprise. The other tourists point at a dolphin leaping nearby, completely unaware of the girl in the water. When the woman looks back down, the mermaid has completely vanished into the deep. She stares at the empty water while the crowd continues to watch the dolphin. Confused, she stands up and looks around, wondering where her mysterious visitor went. From above, the yacht continues its journey, leaving the woman with nothing but a strange memory and a soda can. Later, she stares at the empty red can, unable to stop thinking about the encounter. 2 days pass and she sits in her room, doubting whether the mermaid was even real. She rubs her face in exhaustion, feeling like her mind might be playing tricks on her. She recalls the grueling late nights spent at her old office job before everything changed. The stress of her past routine still haunts her as she tries to navigate her current unemployment. She stretches out on her balcony, trying to force herself to relax and enjoy the vacation. The red soda can remains on the table as a silent reminder of that bizarre afternoon. She takes a walk along the shore, feeling isolated amidst the crowds of happy tourists. Watching everyone else enjoy their time, she wonders how they can afford to be so carefree. Her phone buzzes in her pocket while she ignores the beach activities happening around her. She checks a message from a recruiter, only to find another rejection, because she doesn't meet their high standards. The constant job hunt leaves her feeling defeated and anxious about her future. She worries that if things don't improve, she'll be forced back into a life that makes her miserable. Standing at the water's edge, she feels like the only person who isn't happy in this paradise. A jet ski zooming past catches her attention because the driver looks oddly familiar. She squints her eyes, noticing the distinct pink hair and tan skin of the rider. To her absolute disbelief, the mermaid she met on the boat is now speeding through the waves on a jet ski. The protagonist sprints across the sand, desperate to track down the mysterious girl she saw earlier. She arrives at a seaside rental stand that offers everything from coffee to boat tours. Breathless, she asks the vendor if the pink-haired girl on the jet ski is actually riding his equipment. The man casually explains that the girl is their part-time coach, leaving the protagonist completely stunned. She struggles to process how a mythical being could have a side hustle in the modern world. Despite the steep price of 400 yuan for a short ride, she decides to go for it. She quickly scans a code to pay the fee and get her chance to speak with the coach. Soon, she's holding on tight as they speed across the turquoise water. Getting a closer look, she confirms that this is indeed the same person who gave her a drink on the yacht. The protagonist looks away, feeling a bit nervous about the situation. She reflects on how the girl vanished so suddenly during their first meeting. The coach keeps her eyes on the horizon, seemingly focused on the task at hand. Leaning forward, the protagonist whispers that she knows the truth but promises to keep the secret safe. She explains her childhood love for fairy tales and her sympathy for the original story's tragedy. A vision of a classic mermaid book appears, representing the stories she grew up with. She mentions how she never wanted the mermaid princess to turn into sea foam. In a flashback, a younger version of herself declares that she will grow up to be a protector of mythical beings. However, reality hit hard as she became a tired, ordinary employee stuck in the daily grind. She recalls the exhausting commutes and the feeling that no one could rescue her from her boring life. Back in the present, a heavy silence falls between the two riders. The protagonist looks downcast, perhaps regretting her sudden outburst. The coach glances back, clearly thinking over what was just said. Suddenly, the girl gives a cheerful thumbs up to show she understands. The protagonist is surprised to get such a direct response to her secret promise. She realizes the coach is acknowledging her vow of silence regarding her true nature. They share a brief, lighthearted moment of mutual agreement as they both give a thumbs up. The coach leans back to adjust her position, making the protagonist hold on even tighter for safety. Reaching for the controls, the coach prepares to ramp up the speed. The protagonist's vision begins to blur from the sheer intensity of the ride. The jet ski carves a massive path through the ocean waves. They hit a swell and launch high into the air, defying gravity for a moment. The protagonist screams as she experiences the most intense adrenaline rush of her life. This is a far cry from her old office life, where staying up late with coffee was her only source of excitement. From the shore, other tourists watch the high-speed action and comment on how much fun the pair seems to be having. The jet ski reaches the peak of its jump against the clear blue sky. After a sudden jolt, the protagonist frantically apologizes for losing her grip. The momentum proves to be too much, and she is launched backward off the seat. She hits the ocean with a giant splash, bringing the wild ride to a sudden end. The protagonist struggles beneath the surface, realizing just how bitter the salt water tastes as she sinks. Fortunately, her life jacket works as intended, and she quickly bobs back up to the surface. The coach swims over immediately, offering an apology for the sudden tumble into the waves. She checks the woman over to make sure there are no injuries from the splash. The coach performs a quick but thorough inspection to ensure her passenger is completely unharmed. Embarrassed by her own clumsiness, the protagonist tries to laugh off the incident while floating in the clear water. Before they head back to shore, the coach signals for her to wait for just a moment. With a quick splash, the coach dives deep beneath the surface and disappears from view. Minutes pass by, leaving the woman alone and starting to worry if she has been abandoned in the middle of the ocean. She floats aimlessly, watching the small fish swim beneath her feet in the quiet blue. From a distance, the sea is filled with other people enjoying various summer activities. While she waits in silence, she remains stationary in the water, looking out toward the horizon with a sense of isolation. Suddenly, the coach bursts through the surface with a triumphant splash. She reveals a vibrant pink starfish she managed to find during her deep dive. The protagonist is thrilled to see the sea creature and praises the coach's impressive diving skills. She carefully holds the starfish, fascinated by how it feels and moves in her hands. The two share a lighthearted moment in the waves, bonding over the unique find from the ocean floor. The lively starfish unexpectedly clings to the protagonist's face, causing a small, comedic panic. She laughs at the lively creature, feeling a genuine sense of happiness for the first time in a long while. Later that night, she lies in bed reflecting on the magical experience she had at sea. She can't stop thinking about the coach and the strange, dreamlike quality of their meeting. The next morning, she skips along the sandy shore in a bright yellow dress, feeling completely refreshed. She feels confident in her new look, hoping to make a good impression during her return visit. Using her skills from the corporate world, she calculates exactly how to maximize her budget for more time with the coach. She is determined to use every social trick in the book to secure more lessons. She takes a moment to check her reflection in her phone, making sure her makeup is perfect. Just ahead, she spots the coach talking to a man near the equipment rentals. With a wide smile, she prepares to greet the woman she believes is a secret mermaid. However, her smile fades when the man thanks the coach for her hard work at the store. Her eyes lock onto a shimmering pink fish tail being carried under the coach's arm. The coach waves back casually, revealing that the tail is actually just a specialized costume. The protagonist stands in absolute shock as she learns her mermaid is actually just a professional diving actress. The protagonist stands frozen in confusion as the reality of the situation sinks in. The man casually mentions a nearby aquarium featuring a special Dancing with the Mermaid performance. He invites her to watch the show, unaware of the internal crisis he's triggered. Overwhelmed by the awkward revelation, she abruptly declines the offer. She makes a hasty excuse about needing to pack for her trip home tomorrow. Memories of her previous excitement and childish claims about keeping mermaid secrets now fill her with intense shame. The man watches her flee, noting her habit of running away whenever things get tense. The performer looks on with a disappointed and saddened expression as her new friend departs. Under the midday sun, the protagonist reflects on her own naive idealism. Her footprints trail behind her as she wanders aimlessly across the shore. She runs until she is completely breathless and physically exhausted. Collapsing onto the sand, she laments her poor fitness and even worse luck. She winces at the memory of the performer casually revealing her profession. She struggles to understand why the truth wasn't made clear to her much sooner. A close-up of her eye shows the moment of realization, as she spots the obvious signs she missed. She recalls passing a massive billboard for the Mermaid show that she completely ignored. She blames herself for being too distracted by her phone to notice her surroundings. Looking at the horizon, she feels like a total fool for her mistake. Her social media feed shows photos of her trip, garnering plenty of attention from friends. She realizes this is the most engagement she's ever received on a post. Scrolling further reveals a depressing string of job rejection messages from various companies. The weight of her impending return to reality starts to settle in. She sits alone on a rocky cliff at sunset, feeling defeated by her life prospects. Suddenly, a hand reaches out to offer her a cold canned drink. The performer stands over her, telling her not to give up so easily. The protagonist is shocked to hear the woman's voice, which is unexpectedly low and hoarse. The woman apologizes for her rough voice and sits down to bridge the gap between them. She explains that she wants to properly communicate after the confusion of the previous day. The protagonist cringes internally, remembering how she treated the performer like a mythical creature. A mental image of her childish behavior from the day before makes her want to hide. The two sit in a quiet, slightly awkward silence as the sun continues to set. The performer admits that she spends most of her time underwater and isn't great at human interaction. With a warm smile, she asks the protagonist to repeat what she said when they first met. The protagonist is stunned into silence while clutching a soda can next to her new companion. Her wide-eyed expression reveals total disbelief at the performer's blunt honesty. Reflecting on the situation, the woman begins to process how illogical the performer's explanation actually is. They sit together against a vibrant sunset as the protagonist loudly denies being upset about the misunderstanding. Despite the protagonist's nervous laughter, her companion watches her with a look of genuine concern. The protagonist eventually collapses into a fit of embarrassed laughter as she tries to downplay her feelings. Overwhelmed by the sudden attention, she wipes away tears and admits how strange it feels to be cared for by a stranger. The performer offers a sympathetic gaze, understanding the weight of the moment. The camera pulls back to show the two small figures perched on the edge of a massive, desolate cliffside. Shock hits the protagonist when she learns that this secluded spot has a dangerous reputation. Below them, the ocean waves crash violently against the sharp, jagged rocks. With a melancholy smile, the performer looks down while reflecting on her own experiences. A flashback reveals the performer watching the protagonist from a distance during her earlier beach visit. The woman had stood out because her visible sadness contrasted so sharply with the happy tourists around her. Recalling their first interaction, a hand reaches out to offer a simple can of soda as a gesture of kindness. Back in the present, the performer admits that seeing the protagonist's distress return today made her extremely worried. The protagonist stares back, finally realizing the depth of the performer's empathy. She questions why anyone would go through so much trouble for a random tourist they barely know. Living in a big city has made her cynical, as most people there rarely show concern for a stranger's emotional well-being. The conversation becomes awkward and rambling as the protagonist struggles to express her gratitude. The performer drops a bombshell, admitting she once faced her own deep personal struggles at this very location. This revelation leaves the protagonist completely speechless and visibly shaken. To break the tension, the performer laughs and apologizes for being so intense about her past. The protagonist is left with a look of pure confusion and frustration at the sudden shift in mood. She buries her face in her hands, lamenting her own poor social skills during this intense heart-to-heart. Venting her frustrations, she mentions how her former boss used to mock her lack of emotional intelligence. The performer laughs along, agreeing that the cold nature of city life can make anyone feel small. Wanting to bridge the gap, the performer pulls out her phone to share a glimpse of her previous life. The screen shows a photo of her as a pale city worker before she moved to the coast. Other photos show her professional career performing as a mermaid in a massive aquarium. The protagonist leans in, genuinely impressed by the beauty and skill displayed in the images. The performer explains that her signature pink hair was a requirement for her theatrical role. They are both stunned to discover they actually worked at the exact same large-scale aquarium in the city. Looking up at the horizon, the performer reflects on how the pressures of city life eventually reached a breaking point. Her eyes reflect a deep-seated exhaustion from years of trying to fit into a mold that didn't suit her. She describes a feeling of being pushed into an abyss, mirrored by the image of bubbles rising through dark, deep water. The performer dives into her work as a popular mermaid attraction at the city aquarium. She finds genuine joy in interacting with the excited children who visit the tank daily. The job feels rewarding as she poses for photos and shares friendly gestures with the young fans. A collage of her performances shows her constant engagement with the diverse crowds of guests. However, the narrative shifts as rumors begin to circulate based on a single out-of-context photo. Colleagues at the aquarium start whispering and casting suspicious looks her way as she arrives for her shift. Unaware of the situation, the performer cheerfully invites her coworkers to join her for dinner after a long day of swimming. Her colleagues pull her aside to show her a viral post that has been gaining significant traction online. The performer is stunned as she looks at the phone, seeing her reputation being targeted. A malicious online article falsely claims she is involved in an inappropriate relationship with an older man for financial gain. The comment section is filled with hateful messages attacking her appearance and questioning her character. Frustrated and hurt, the performer demands to know why no one is acting to counter these blatant lies. Her coworkers encourage her to report the misinformation and stand up against the rumor mongers. Feeling a temporary sense of relief, she thanks her colleagues for their apparent support and belief in her. Late at night, she sits in her apartment, determined to address the situation through her laptop. She prepares a public rebuttal, including the actual photos of her interactions with families to prove the rumors are fake. She types out a firm message asking the public to respect her profession and stop judging her based on her work attire. After reporting the malicious posts, she stretches out, hoping the truth will finally prevail so she can rest. Exhausted by the mental toll, she heads to bed, seeking comfort in her quiet room. She cuddles with her large shark and penguin plush toys, trying to find some peace before the next day's shows. Despite the stress, she tries to remind herself how much she originally loved working at the aquarium. Unfortunately, the dark corners of the internet remain obsessed with twisting her image for their own entertainment. The performer's heart sinks the next morning when she realizes the harassment has only intensified. In the locker room, a male colleague expresses his anger over how people are editing and circulating her photos. Still feeling vulnerable, she thanks him for his concern and for standing by her during this crisis. The man claims they should have taken better care of her, though his expression suggests a hidden motive. A close-up of his eye reveals a cold, calculating gaze that the performer fails to notice. New threads appear online with even more extreme lies, suggesting her job involves illegal services. The situation escalates as netizens begin attempting to leak her personal school information and contact details. Distracted by the overwhelming mental torture, she suffers a physical accident during an underwater performance. Following the incident, she is summoned to the curator's office to discuss her future at the facility. She sits in the office with a heavy heart, clearly drained by the relentless harassment and her recent injury. The curator informs her that because of her ear injury, she cannot return to the water for several months. She accepts the news, deciding it might be best to leave and focus on finishing her internship requirements. The curator taps his desk impatiently as she speaks, seemingly uninterested in her recovery. Suddenly, he shifts the conversation, suggesting there is a different way for her to make money while she's sidelined. He points to his monitor, which is filled with the very malicious photos used to harass her, and suggests she use her looks to her advantage. The performer is frozen in shock as the reality of his inappropriate proposal sets in. The curator looms over her, exerting uncomfortable pressure and suggesting she should use this opportunity to earn more. A manager smiles while pressuring the performer to exploit her appearance for profit. He places a hand on her shoulder, ignoring her clear discomfort and refusal to comply with his demands. The performer becomes visibly distressed as the hostile work environment intensifies. She is cornered and pressured further, as the manager insists that following his lead is her only option. Refusing to submit, she grabs her belongings and flees the room to escape the situation. She bursts through the doors and runs down the hallway, leaving the workplace behind. Once alone, the weight of the trauma causes her to break down in tears. She sobs uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the harassment she has endured. Distraught and feeling isolated, she runs off into the night. Her situation worsens when her school releases a formal statement distancing themselves from her case. Her own mother sends a series of judgmental messages, effectively cutting her off from family support. With nowhere left to turn, she stands at a high vantage point overlooking the ocean. She looks out at the dark water with an expression of complete despair. Stepping toward the edge of the rocky ledge, she prepares to leave everything behind. She falls from the cliffside toward the crashing waves below. As she descends, she catches a glimpse of the stars above. The water churns violently against the rocks as she hits the surface. She resurfaces and gasps for air, suddenly struck by a change in perspective. Looking up at the vast, starry sky, she finds a profound beauty in the world that she hadn't noticed before. Realizing that life still holds many beautiful things, she sits peacefully on the shore, choosing to move forward. She begins a new, quiet life in nature, finding joy in small things like a tiny crab on the beach. She embraces her personal style and finds happiness in simple acts of self-care. The performer finally feels a sense of true freedom and peace in her new environment. Back in the present, she tells the protagonist to find beauty in the scenery whenever life feels difficult. The protagonist is moved to tears by the heart-wrenching story of survival. She expresses her anger toward those who mistreated her friend, showing fierce support. Grateful that the performer stayed in this world, the protagonist pulls her into a tight, empathetic hug. She continues to sob while condemning the people who caused so much pain. The performer hugs her back, clearly touched by the genuine compassion. She tells the protagonist to look up at the sky as the view begins to change. They sit together on the cliffside, watching the stars come out over the ocean. The performer helps her friend up and suggests taking a souvenir photo of their time together. The protagonist shyly agrees and asks if they can take the photo as a pair. They pose for a friendly selfie, smiling together under the night sky. As they walk back, the performer promises to bring her to this beautiful spot again. Looking at her companion, the protagonist realizes that the person beside her is more beautiful than any scenery. She sees the performer as a resilient, real-life mermaid who survived against all odds. She feels a deep sense of relief that her friend is still here. Though she feels a bit shy about their growing bond, she is happy to be by her side. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist prepares to ask if they can take their friendship even further. Protagonist beats herself up for speaking her mind so bluntly. Performer laughs off the awkwardness and suggests they continue their walk. The duo stands together on the dark, rocky coast under the stars. Two strangers interrupt their peace, calling out to them from the shore. The men try to act smooth while inviting them to a nearby beach party. Performer maintains her composure while firmly declining their invitation. One of the men continues to pester her with unwelcome comments. A well-aimed object suddenly strikes the loudmouth right in the head. Protagonist stands high on a rock with a massive stone, threatening to drop it. She gives them a terrifying look, claiming jail would provide free food anyway. The men are visibly shaken by her intense and unpredictable energy. They beat a hasty retreat while shouting insults from a safe distance. Protagonist keeps her guard up until the intruders are long gone. Performer stares in awe, deeply moved by this display of protection. She reflects on her past, where people only admired her from afar. It hits her that this is the first time anyone has defended her so fiercely. Protagonist grabs performer's hand to lead her away from the scene. She urges a quick getaway to avoid any further trouble with the men. Performer follows along with a bright smile, finding her friend's spirit charming. The two of them sprint across the sand, even if they're a bit lost. They finally make it back to the hotel grounds under the night sky. Protagonist is completely winded from the run, while performer is still full of energy. Despite her exhaustion, protagonist tries to act like she's in peak condition. They stand by the illuminated pool, relieved to be back in a safe area. Performer goes to leave, but protagonist stops her for one last thing. She pulls out her phone and asks for the performer's contact details. Protagonist explains she's leaving tomorrow and doesn't want the connection to end. Her phone suddenly erupts with a loud ringtone, startling both of them. She fumbles to answer the unexpected call as performer looks on. The caller offers her a job interview, catching her completely off guard. She quickly accepts the professional opportunity despite the late hour. Disaster strikes as the phone battery dies immediately after the call ends. Performer reveals her phone is also dead, leaving them without digital tools. They decide to exchange their information the old-fashioned way by memorizing it. Protagonist listens intently, promising to remember the contact ID perfectly. The pair stands by the pool, solidifying their promise to reconnect later. Performer introduces herself as Ailey, finally sharing her real name. The story jumps forward 2 months to the exterior of a large aquarium. Ailey reflects on the fast-paced nature of life as she prepares for her shift. She looks back with a sense of loss, wishing a connection from her past hadn't been cut short by reality. A voice over the intercom announces that the next performance is about to begin. After finishing her duties, Ailey changes back into her casual clothes and waves goodbye to her coworkers. She notices her muscles are a bit sore from the day's physical exertion in the water. As she walks through the aquarium, she wonders if she needs to adjust her swimming technique to be more efficient. Suddenly, a hand waves energetically from a distance, catching her attention. It is the protagonist, who is jumping and waving frantically to get Ailey's notice. Ailey stops in her tracks, her eyes wide with total shock at the unexpected reunion. She panics for a moment, realizing she isn't wearing her hearing aids after the performance. She watches the protagonist intently, moved by the effort made to find her. The protagonist begins to move her hands in a very specific, deliberate sequence. She carefully executes a series of sign language gestures she has been practicing. The message is clear as she finishes the sign for being present and staying by her side. Immediately after, the protagonist worries that she might have messed up the hand signals. Feeling awkward, she quickly checks her phone to see if she researched the right gestures. Ailey rushes over and grabs her hands, giving her a warm and enthusiastic welcome back. She is visibly touched and happy that someone went through the effort to learn to communicate with her. Later that night, the two find themselves looking out over the peaceful, dark coastline. They stand by a drink stall, catching up on everything that has happened over the last 2 months. The protagonist explains that she has let go of the stressful expectations of living in a big city. She observes that in the modern world, people often forget how to simply enjoy their time. Smiling, she admits that her previous days spent at this beach were the happiest of her life. Ailey mentions she was worried when the protagonist never added her contact information as promised. In a chibi-style moment of distress, the protagonist cries about her terrible memory for numbers. She explains that she even tried to get the information from the motorboat owner, but he was no help. The owner apparently thought she was just another person pestering his staff for their personal details. The protagonist bows deeply, apologizing for her lack of math skills and for making Ailey wait. Ailey smiles gently and mentions that while the environment is nice, the wages at the aquarium are quite low. The protagonist insists it's perfectly fine since she doesn't spend much and just wants to be there. She reaches out toward the sea, expressing how much she has grown to like the water and the fish. They look forward to the future, planning to have dinner together every day after they finish work. Ailey points out various spots along the coast where they can go paddleboarding or diving later. A flashback shows the protagonist's formal interview for the aquarium job earlier that day. The manager asks if there is a specific reason she chose such a remote location for work. With an intense and solemn expression, the protagonist declares she is there to stay close to and protect Ailey. The manager is so taken aback by the passionate response that she accidentally spits out her tea. She laughs it off, noting that the answer was so bold it almost sounded like a threat. Fresh coconuts sit on a desk while the air conditioning hums in the background. Protagonist finishes her daily tasks, enjoying the peaceful office life at the aquarium. She reflects on how these easygoing days feel almost like a dream compared to her past. Ready to wrap up for the day, she prepares to head out and find Ailey for dinner. Suddenly, a colleague bursts into the office with urgent news that a tourist has gone missing. The staff gathers outside to assist a distressed woman searching for her lost daughter. Protagonist and Ailey listen to the grim details about the dangers of the local coastline. They whisper about the situation, learning that the daughter left after a heated argument. It's revealed that witnesses saw the mother and daughter fighting on the beach just days prior. Ailey takes in the information, her expression turning somber as she considers the girl's safety. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the two decide to check a nearby dangerous cliff. Ailey's worry grows as they rush toward the location where the girl might be. Seagulls circle overhead as they arrive at the desolate rocky area. They spot a figure sitting alone on a high rock overlooking the crashing waves. Comparing the girl to a photo on a phone, they confirm she is indeed the missing tourist. They carefully observe from behind cover, planning how to approach the distraught girl. Protagonist encourages Lee to use her gentle nature to reach out to the stranger. A hand reaches out, offering a cold can of soda as a peace offering. Lee approaches the crying girl, trying to comfort her with a simple drink. She offers a warm, friendly smile, hoping to de-escalate the tension. The girl looks up, her face tear-streaked and filled with sudden, misplaced anger. Instead of accepting the help, the girl lashes out and throws the soda can away. The stranger begins shouting insults, accusing Lee of being the type of person who steals partners. She stands up and continues her verbal attack, projecting her personal frustrations onto Lee. The girl screams about superficial beauty, losing all composure as she rants. She reveals her bitterness over a past relationship, blaming Lee for her own misfortunes. Protagonist watches from the side, her shock quickly turning into protective anger. Stepping forward, the protagonist blocks the girl and prepares to defend her friend. She launches into a fierce rebuttal, calling out the girl's toxic behavior and unfair accusations. Pointing a finger, she tells the girl to look inward instead of attacking innocent people. She loudly proclaims that Lee has a kind heart that is far superior to such bitterness. Without waiting for a response, the protagonist grabs Lee's hand and leads her away. They walk back while the protagonist continues to fume over the girl's lack of gratitude. Their footsteps crunch on the rocky terrain as they head away from the cliffside. They leave behind the beach area, moving toward more stable ground. Protagonist remains firm in her stance that some people aren't worth the sympathy. As the sun sets, the two walk hand in hand, the tension of the encounter finally fading. Protagonist suddenly feels embarrassed about her aggressive outburst and tries to apologize. Lee smiles warmly, admitting she feels happy and safe having someone protect her. The protagonist's heart skips a beat at the sincere compliment. She explains that her past work experience taught her how to stand up to unreasonable people. Their moment is interrupted by the sound of Lee's phone ringing loudly. Lee answers the call, which comes directly from the aquarium management. While Lee talks, the protagonist looks away, reflecting on her desire to stay by her side. She worries that expressing her true feelings too suddenly might make things awkward. Lee listens to the person on the other end, her expression becoming grim and serious. Observing the change in mood, the protagonist feels a wave of self-doubt and insecurity. She suggests they head back quickly as the atmosphere shifts. Lee reveals the tragic update from the call. The person they were looking for has been found, but it is too late. Police siren lights flash as the authorities arrive at the scene of the incident. Emergency services work to secure the area and handle the tragic outcome. The mother of the victim breaks down in grief, while the protagonist and Lee watch from a distance. Lee is visibly shaken by the weight of the situation. The protagonist remains silent, processing the grim reality of what they just witnessed. A close-up of the scene emphasizes the gravity of the loss. In a brief reflection, colleagues elsewhere discuss how the extreme pressures of modern life can lead to such sudden tragedies. They acknowledge the inherent risks in their high-stress environment. The shock of the event causes the protagonist's vision to blur as the intensity becomes overwhelming. Unable to withstand the emotional impact, the protagonist collapses, prompting Lee to call for medical assistance. The protagonist eventually begins to regain consciousness. Lee is leaning over, the look of intense relief and concern. Back in the dormitory, she explains that the fainting spell was caused by the sudden shock. Feeling the warmth of her care, the protagonist experiences a moment of internal fluster. The protagonist hides under the covers, feeling embarrassed about the situation. They begin to discuss the investigation and the background of the victim. Lee shares the tragic details revealed by the authorities. They sit together on the bunk bed as the full story of the girl's life comes to light. Lee describes the immense family pressure the girl had faced for years. The protagonist listens intently, realizing the victim had carried a heavy burden of grievances. It becomes clear that the accumulated stress eventually reached a breaking point. The protagonist finds the mother's reaction particularly difficult to process. A memory of the mother's specific behavior highlights the complex emotions involved. Lee offers a supportive gesture to help the protagonist through the emotional weight. The protagonist starts to feel more at ease under her comforting care. This moment of support provides a much-needed sense of peace. Suddenly, a large insect appears on the protagonist's hand, instantly breaking the quiet mood. The dark, oily pest crawls across the skin, causing immediate alarm. Panic sets in as the protagonist realizes the size of the intruder. The protagonist leaps up as the insect takes flight toward Lee. Lee is caught off guard by the sudden warning about the pest. The intruder lands on Lee's clothing, leading to a frantic struggle. Loud noises echo through the room as they deal with the unwanted guest. A well-aimed strike with a slipper decisively ends the intrusion. The protagonist stands victoriously, having successfully handled the situation. Lee is deeply impressed, praising the protagonist for being so brave against the creepy crawly. Flustered by the high praise, the protagonist struggles to form a coherent response. They offer to take the remains outside while trying to maintain their composure. The protagonist reflects on their past habit of interacting with various social media posts. They recall their collection of mature keepsakes, thinking they were immune to being easily flustered. However, the current real-life interaction proves to be far more impactful than expected. Internal conflict arises as the protagonist tries to maintain a disciplined and professional demeanor. As Lee prepares to freshen up, the protagonist makes a quick exit to give her the necessary space. The protagonist's mind goes completely blank as she processes the current situation. She begins to blush intensely while imagining a scenario involving the shower. The overwhelming thoughts cause a sudden collapse, leaving her completely knocked out on the floor. Ailey leaves a bundle of laundry on the ground, telling her friend to take things easy. A cockroach suddenly crawls out from the pile, appearing surprisingly bold. The protagonist looks up with newfound determination, ready to handle the pest. A hand reaches out to slide the lock shut on a bedroom door. Ailey enters her room, which is filled with various marine animal plushies. She lies back on her bed, looking thoughtful and content after the long day. The two friends share a light-hearted moment while discussing the task of doing laundry. Ailey relaxes on her bed surrounded by her large penguin and shark plushies. She pokes the cheek of the penguin toy while reflecting on her recent experiences. While staring at the ceiling, she admits to herself that she has developed feelings for the protagonist. A close-up of her face shows a slight blush as she realizes this is more than just a friendship. Her smartphone buzzes on the nightstand, indicating an incoming notification. She sits up to check the device, noting that the message is from an unrecognized number. Her expression immediately shifts to one of shock and concern as she reads the screen. The text message mentions old photos taken online, creating an immediate sense of unease. The exterior of the dormitory is shown quiet and still under the night sky. The protagonist keeps a detailed notebook, listing out Ailey's specific likes and dislikes. She vows to protect her friend by eliminating any pests within a 10-meter radius. The protagonist gets flustered and giggly while thinking about her personal goals. She reaches over to grab her phone while resting on the bed. The protagonist looks at the screen, contemplating the current state of her relationship. She gazes at a digital photo of the two of them together. A flashback shows a time when she was completely buried under schoolwork and parental pressure. Another memory depicts her as a tired workaholic with no time for a personal life. She zooms in on the image of Ailey's smiling face. With a blush on her cheeks, the protagonist decides it is time to be brave. She holds her notebook and phone, determined to improve her social skills. The morning sun rises over the aquarium building located by the sea. The protagonist arrives at the office and offers a bright greeting to her coworkers. A colleague expresses deep concern, mentioning how worried everyone was after she fainted. The protagonist tries to appear energetic despite clearly having stayed up too late. She explains that the shock of the previous day's incident was difficult to bear. She promises to work harder and avoid causing any more trouble for the team. Her coworker notes that the beach environment requires a lot of hard work. The staff discusses the arrival of a new performance costume for the upcoming anniversary. The protagonist takes charge of the large delivery box containing the special outfit. She flashes a confident smile, eager to deliver the package to its owner. Ailey sits alone by the pool, looking distressed while checking her phone. The screen displays harassing messages from an individual demanding a private meeting. The sender claims to have more photos and suggests they watch them together later. Ailey leans forward in visible distress, feeling disgusted by the unwanted attention. She reflects on how the development of social networks has made such incidents more common. A vision of a crowded aquarium event highlights the difficulty of maintaining privacy. She decides to keep the situation to herself to avoid causing panic among the staff. A camera lens suddenly focuses in with a distinct clicking sound. Ailey's eye widens as she realizes someone is watching her from the shadows. She turns around in total shock, realizing her privacy has been compromised again. Ailey spots the protagonist holding up a phone and looks visibly startled by the unexpected presence. The protagonist feels guilty for the scare and tries to explain that they were only attempting to capture a high-quality photo. A brief flashback reveals the protagonist spent time researching photography techniques just to take better pictures of the performer. Apologizing for the intrusion, the protagonist is relieved when Ailey admits she mistook them for a potential harasser. Ailey is actually impressed by the result and enthusiastically requests a copy of the shot for herself. The protagonist studies the image more closely and begins to worry about the underlying sadness in Ailey's expression. To shift the focus, the protagonist announces they have arrived to deliver and test a brand new performance costume. Excited by the news, Ailey agrees to jump into the pool and test the new gear immediately. While waiting, the protagonist looks at the candid photo again, noting how well it captured the performer's beauty. After enlarging the image, the protagonist notices that Ailey's eyes look far more distressed than they first appeared. This discovery leads the protagonist to wonder if something serious is bothering her behind the scenes. Ailey calls out from the changing area, explaining that she needs assistance with the fastenings on the back of the suit. The protagonist approaches the curtain, checking to see if there is a functional issue with the new costume. Working carefully, the protagonist helps secure the intricate charms and hooks on the back of the mermaid outfit. Ailey seems a bit flustered by the close interaction as the final adjustments are made to the gear. Behind the screen, the protagonist apologizes for their lack of coordination while finishing the task. Once ready, Ailey hands over a small keepsake to be held safely during the test swim. Now fully equipped with her mermaid tail, she carefully slides into the pool to begin the trial. She hands over a pair of goggles, suggesting that watching the performance from the water will provide a better view. Ailey explains that the suit needs to be tested for underwater movement and wants the protagonist to be her first audience member. The protagonist stands stunned, realizing they are about to witness a completely private and exclusive performance. Overwhelmed by the gesture, The protagonist feels a surge of excitement about the upcoming display. They quickly adjust the goggles and prepare to submerge to get a clear look at the underwater action. Looking beneath the surface, the protagonist sees the mermaid gliding through the water with incredible grace. The view is breathtaking, making the performer appear as though she is glowing in the blue depths. The protagonist reflects on the passion Ailey has for her work, which is evident in every movement she makes. After a few moments, the protagonist runs out of air and is forced to surface for a breath. Panting at the pool's edge, they lament their own lack of physical endurance and specialized skills. A memory surfaces of the protagonist's past habits, involving nothing more than lounging on a sofa with a phone. They recall previous attempts at fitness that lasted only a couple of days before they gave up. Even a spur-of-the-moment academic class resulted in only 2 sessions before being abandoned. The protagonist wishes they had been more disciplined in the past so they could be a more capable person for Ailey. Feeling a sense of inferiority, they hope to eventually become someone as impressive as the person they admire. They quickly snap out of their self-doubt, reminding themselves to stay focused on the current performance. A strange black shape suddenly appears in the water, catching the protagonist's eye and causing confusion. A massive volume of water suddenly surges upward, catching the protagonist completely off guard. Behind the goggles, the protagonist's face is frozen in a look of pure, unadulterated shock. An enormous orca breaches the surface right in front of them, bringing a sudden and dramatic end to the solo show. The protagonist sits frozen on the floor as a massive orca stares her down from the edge of the pool. The sheer scale of the creature is overwhelming compared to seeing it on a screen, leaving her trembling in fear as it opens its mouth. Relief arrives when Ailey emerges from the water, calling the animal Pang-hu and scolding him for sneaking out of his pool again. Ailey explains that they rescued this orca, and he often comes to play during her practice sessions. She laughs while interacting with the giant creature, assuring the protagonist that Pang-hu is actually a very good boy. The orca leans its heavy head against the performer, prompting her to comment on his weight. The protagonist's fear quickly turns to annoyance as she realizes the animal is just being a pest. As she tries to walk away, Pang-hu lets out a massive splash that leaves her completely drenched. Dripping wet, she heads into the women's locker room to clean up. She fumes while drying her hair, frustrated that the orca interrupted her private moment with Ailey. A colleague spots her and asks why she looks like she just crawled out of the pool. While walking through the room, the protagonist explains the encounter with the troublesome orca. The colleague laughs it off, noting that the animal is known for being a bit of a handful. She adds that the orca has a habit of stealing people's keepsakes and loves to be near Ailey. The idea of the animal being so close to the performer makes the protagonist's blood boil with jealousy. The colleague's expression softens as she begins to explain the history between the two. Apparently, Ailey was incredibly lonely when she first started working at the aquarium and avoided everyone. She would often sit by the massive observation glass all by herself. The flashback shows a somber Ailey eating alone, clearly burdened by something on her mind. Her eyes reflected a deep sadness that no one felt comfortable asking about at the time. That changed when Pang-hu approached her, offering a sense of companionship when no one else could. Back in the present, the colleague explains that the animals were the only ones who could truly comfort Ailey back then. The protagonist realizes that the orca played a vital role in helping Ailey open up to others. Thinking back to how Ailey supported her during their first meeting, she feels a renewed sense of purpose. She grips her locker door, determined to find a way to get along with the giant animal. She imagines a future where she is the one providing emotional support to the performer. In this daydream, Ailey looks happy and grateful for their meeting. The protagonist envisions a platonic and supportive bond where they can rely on one another completely. Energized by this fantasy, she grabs a bucket of fish and heads back to the pool, much to the confusion of other staff members. She offers the treats to Pang-hu, hoping this peace offering will make them best friends. Instead of accepting the bribe, the orca immediately blasts her with a jet of water. A trainer rushes over to scold the animal for his behavior toward the staff. Drenched for the second time that day, the protagonist returns to the locker room in a state of total defeat. She laments her inability to build a rapport with her aquatic colleagues. Suddenly, a strange clattering sound echoes from underneath one of the bathroom stalls. She stands still in the empty room, wondering what could have made such a noise. Looking toward the stalls, she calls out to see if anyone is there. Tension rises as she realizes the facility should be completely empty at this hour. Protagonist enters the locker room with a worried expression, sensing something is wrong. She notices a stall door is unlocked and slowly pushes it open to investigate. Upon seeing the state of the room, she covers her mouth in absolute horror and disgust. The aquarium staff later gather in the office to discuss the security breach and the discovery of a broken camera. Protagonist slams her hand on the desk, furious that a perpetrator managed to sneak into the women's locker room. Ailey watches with concern as her friend fumes over the ruined costume and the safety of the performers. One of the senior staff members explains that the police have been notified, though the investigation will take time. Ailey admits she has been receiving strange messages recently, but she never imagined the situation would escalate this far. The group huddles around her phone to examine the most recent harassing message. Protagonist loses her temper, shouting about how despicable the harasser's words are. The team encourages A-Lee to share any future incidents immediately so they can find a solution together. Outside, a large banner for the aquarium's upcoming 2024 anniversary celebration hangs near the entrance. The senior staff member realizes that A-Lee cannot be left alone, and that they will need to prepare a replacement costume soon. As night falls, the lights flicker in the dormitory building where the staff are staying. Inside a room, the protagonist secures the door with multiple heavy-duty locks to ensure their safety. She turns back toward the room with a deep blush, feeling the weight of the situation. Ailey explains that she has been staying in this storage room because she couldn't get used to the regular dormitories. Protagonist tries to act tough, giving a thumbs up and claiming she actually prefers sleeping on hard beds. Ailey smiles warmly, telling her friend that she is a fun and reliable person who always makes her laugh. The two sit on their beds, which are separated by a small storage unit, as Ailey continues to praise her friend's sincerity. Protagonist is deeply moved, wondering if Ailey truly holds such a high opinion of her. Their heartfelt moment is suddenly interrupted by the loud buzzing of a phone on the nightstand. Ailey reaches for the device, while the protagonist wonders who could be messaging so late at night. Ailey's expression turns cold as she realizes the harasser is using a new number to reach her. Protagonist jumps up in a rage, demanding to take the phone and give the stalker a piece of her mind. Ailey remains composed, advising that responding to such people only encourages their behavior. She pulls up the settings on her phone to deal with the unwanted contact. With a relieved smile, Ailey shows that the new number has been added to the block list. Protagonist watches her, feeling her own anger dissipate in the face of Ailey's positive attitude. When asked what she was going to say before the interruption, the protagonist becomes too embarrassed to repeat her thoughts. Suddenly, the creaking bed gives way with a loud crack, sending the protagonist tumbling. Ailey peers over the divider to check on her friend, who is now awkwardly sitting on the floor. Outside near the palm trees, a hooded figure sits in the shadows while holding a camera. The stalker scrolls through a long list of sent messages, growing frustrated that he is being ignored. He deludes himself into thinking Ailey is just being shy and playing hard to get. Thinking he has found the perfect solution, the figure decides he will simply have to show her his photos in person. Night falls over the city building as the lights begin to dim for the evening. Inside the storage room, the protagonist lies wide awake in bed, feeling completely overwhelmed by the proximity of her companion. She can't help but steal a nervous glance at Ailey, who is resting right beside her. Ailey looks incredibly peaceful while sleeping, making the protagonist wonder how she can be so relaxed. Taking deep breaths, the protagonist tries her best to clear her mind and force herself to go to sleep. Suddenly, a strange dream begins where Ailey leans over her in the dark room. In this vivid vision, the protagonist finds herself unable to move or speak as the scene unfolds. Ailey appears before her with a dazed expression, adding to the surreal nature of the nightmare. The protagonist's face turns bright red as she experiences the intense pressure of the hallucination. She suddenly jolts awake in a cold sweat, clutching her blankets and gasping for air. Realizing it was just a dream, she tries to settle back down and stop her racing heart. Frustrated by her own thoughts, she sits up in bed and buries her face in her hands. The protagonist remains deeply flustered, unable to believe her mind is wandering in such a direction. She curls up into a ball, desperately trying to find a way to distract herself from the lack of sleep. Deciding she won't be able to rest, the protagonist sits on the edge of the bed and looks for something to do. She notices the numerous storage boxes scattered around the small room and wonders if they are in the way. Her curiosity gets the better of her as she looks at a large cardboard box tucked under the desk. Peering inside the container, she begins to sort through various keepsakes and items. She squats down on the floor, fully committed to organizing the scattered supplies while Ailey sleeps. Nearby, Ailey remains completely unaware of the late-night activity, resting soundly under the covers. The protagonist's eyes soften as she looks toward her friend, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She recalls the beautiful image of the mermaid princess performing gracefully in the water. Remembering that radiant smile, the protagonist decides she must do something to help her friend shine again. She sits at the small desk, quietly working on a task to support the performer's upcoming show. Morning eventually arrives, casting a bright light over the aquarium entrance as a new day begins. Back at the locker room, the protagonist looks visibly drained while talking to Ailey. Despite the dark circles under her eyes, she forces a shaky thumbs up and insists she slept perfectly. Ailey heads off to confirm the music for her performance, leaving her tired friend behind. The protagonist waves goodbye, still struggling to maintain her composure after the long night. Ailey watches her with a worried expression, clearly sensing that something is wrong. When night returns, the protagonist is back on the edge of the bed, still unable to find rest. Ailey lies awake this time, worrying that she might be the reason her friend is suffering. Ailey wakes up startled, wondering what's going on in the middle of the night. The protagonist is caught red-handed while trying to be stealthy with a special keepsake. She breaks into a cold sweat, completely panicked after being discovered in the dark. Later, Ailey looks down with a reflective expression, sharing some heavy thoughts about her career. The protagonist is caught off guard by the sudden closeness, her eyes wide with shock. Ailey offers a supportive embrace, acknowledging the incredible effort put into the new project. A vision of Ailey's grace as a mermaid reminds the protagonist why this work is so important. She holds on to Ailey, feeling the weight of her unspoken feelings. Deep in thought, she considers whether now is the right time to speak her mind. She grips her clothes tightly, struggling to find the confidence to be honest. Overwhelmed with nerves, she suddenly pushes Ailey back to keep things professional. The internal struggle ends in a total confident failure as she loses her nerve at the last second. She slumps over in comedic dejection, feeling like a total coward. Getting back to work, she takes academic measurements of Ailey's legs to ensure the costume fits just right. After a long period of collaboration, the final touches are finally put on the new design. The big day finally arrives at the massive aquarium for the anniversary celebration. Massive crowds gather around the pool, buzzing with anticipation for the main event. A hand reaches toward the glass as the show begins beneath the surface. Ailey glides through the water, looking absolutely stunning in her new dark mermaid attire. Watching through her phone, the protagonist is moved to tears by the successful performance. The staff stands together, proud of the beautiful display they've created together. A colleague points out that the protagonist's dedication has really paid off during this project. The protagonist shouts in embarrassment, caught off guard by the sudden call-out. Her coworkers laugh and offer their support for her hard work. She stares at her phone with a heavy blush, lost in her own thoughts. Her focus suddenly shifts when she spots something strange on the video she just recorded. Her expression turns sharp as she realizes something isn't right in the crowd. A hooded figure is seen lurking in a corner, taking photos from a very suspicious angle. The individual begins to sneak toward a restricted area, raising immediate red flags. The protagonist asks her director to take over recording the performance, while she heads backstage to investigate something suspicious. From a vantage point above the aquarium, she spots someone out of place and prepares to call security. She passes a sign clearly marking the area as restricted to authorized personnel only. Down the hall, a hooded man with a large camera is caught sneaking around the corners. The protagonist watches closely, confirming that the intruder is definitely not looking for a restroom. She steps out to confront the man, reminding him that the area is strictly off-limits to guests. Maintaining a strained smile, she demands to inspect the digital contents of his camera. The man looks back in a panic, realizing he's been caught. He immediately turns and sprints away, leading the protagonist on a high-speed chase. The protagonist smirks, knowing she's already one step ahead of the intruder. Security guards quickly intervene, using a specialized restraint tool to pin the man against the wall. The chase through the industrial corridors ends abruptly as the staff converges on the trespasser. The protagonist successfully confiscates the camera, while security keeps the struggling man in place. She ignores his frantic demands for his property and begins scrolling through the saved files. Her eyes narrow in shock as she views the evidence on the screen. The camera is filled with unauthorized, invasive photos of the performer taken from inappropriate angles. The intruder tries to justify his actions, pathetically claiming he's just a dedicated fan. The protagonist stares him down with pure disgust, unmoved by his weak excuses. Her anger flares as she realizes the level of disrespect shown toward the performer. She tells him that his behavior is a burden rather than support, while security maintains their hold. With a cold look, she informs the man that every single one of his invasive photos has been deleted. She continues her verbal takedown, calling out his pathetic attempts to hide his identity. Losing her cool, she delivers a physical strike to the coward, while berating his lack of basic decency. She shouts at him for targeting the vulnerable while being too afraid to face anyone stronger. The intruder whimpers in fear, claiming he never actually made it into the locker room. He reveals that he was only looking for the room because an online contact gave him the performer's personal details. The protagonist is stunned to realize there might be an entire network of people targeting her friend. Back at the pool, Ailey surfaces and gasps for air after her long performance. She pulls herself onto the tiled edge, exhausted from the physical demands of the show. She thinks back to the protagonist waving excitedly in the crowd during the set. A soft blush creeps onto her face as she finds the protagonist's constant support to be incredibly endearing. Meanwhile, the shadows of the facility remain quiet. A staff member stands by the water's edge, preparing for the post-show cleanup. A scenic view of a coastal town reveals a peaceful neighborhood nestled right by the shimmering blue sea. The quiet streets are lined with modern apartment buildings under a bright, sunny sky. Inside one of the homes, a man encourages a younger guy to stop wasting his holidays and look for a job at the local aquarium. The young man isn't interested and peeks through his door, complaining about the heat and wanting to stay inside. He retreats to his desk, preferring the comfort of his air-conditioned room while he browses the internet. His hand moves across the laptop touchpad as he searches for something new to occupy his time. As he scrolls through various image galleries, his expression remains bored until something catches his eye. He leans in closer, looking at a specific thumbnail that seems strangely familiar. He realizes he recognizes the girl from a promotional poster he saw earlier. Curious, he continues to navigate through the site to see what else he can find. A dark smile spreads across his face as he reads comments from others looking for information on this performer. He closes his laptop, deciding that the aquarium job might actually be worth taking for the extra money and access it provides. Later at the aquarium, Ailey waves kindly to the staff member while she performs her mermaid routine. The stalker eventually gets his hands on a costume piece, looking at the keepsake with a deeply unsettling expression. He recalls how the protagonist was always around, preventing him from getting close to the performer. Now that he's worked there for a while, he believes he has finally found the perfect time to catch her alone. He stands outside a curtained area, waiting and watching for his opportunity. Inside, Ailey hears a voice and wonders why the part-timer has suddenly shown up near the changing area. The intruder claims he brought her a brand new towel, trying to sound helpful while lingering outside. His shadow remains visible against the curtain as he waits for a reaction. He eventually pretends to walk away, though he doesn't actually leave the vicinity. Ailey peeks through the curtains to check if the coast is clear, feeling a sense of dread. To her shock, the stalker is standing right by the pool, holding up his phone with a malicious grin. He taunts her, revealing that he didn't just bring a towel, but also took her spare clothes. He walks away with a confident stride, dismissing her anger and claiming he just wants to be closer to her. Ailey is left in a state of pure shock as she realizes the severity of the trap he set. Suddenly, the protagonist arrives on the scene, shouting at the intruder to stay back. Using a long maintenance pole, the protagonist shoves the stalker backward, toward the edge of the walkway. The stalker loses his footing and falls into the water with a massive splash. His phone sinks into the pool, and the protagonist realizes they need to retrieve it before the evidence is destroyed. The protagonist immediately takes charge, telling the others to look after Ailey and keep the intruder under control. Taking a determined step toward the edge, the protagonist prepares to act. Without hesitation, the protagonist leaps into the pool to secure the device and protect Ailey's privacy. Water erupts as the protagonist dives headfirst into the aquarium tank. She swims toward the bottom, closing in on the sinking smartphone. She recalls the stalker's boast about using digital manipulation to target victims. After successfully grabbing the device, she begins her ascent back to the surface. The protagonist realizes she is much deeper than expected and starts running out of air. From the dark depths, the light at the surface seems dangerously far away. Vision begins to fade as her energy completely depletes underwater. Her hand reaches upward one last time before she begins to sink. Suddenly, a firm hand reaches out and catches her, preventing her from drifting away. Through the hazy water, she sees a figure coming to her rescue. Ailey appears like a guardian in the water, pulling her towards safety. Back on land, the protagonist regains consciousness while resting on a wooden bench. She immediately springs up, worried about the status of the evidence they secured. Ailey reassures her that the phone is functional thanks to her quick thinking. Ailey's expression turns grim as she reviews the disturbing contents found on the device. The phone contains evidence of the stalker targeting numerous other individuals. Hearing about the extent of the perpetrator's actions leaves the protagonist in total disbelief. Fury takes over as she demands the criminal be handed over to the authorities immediately. She brushes off the danger, admitting she only cared about stopping the harasser's schemes. Ailey listens intently, clearly touched by the protagonist's selfless bravery. A soft blush creeps onto Ailey's face as she processes the protagonist's words. A staff member checks in through the doorway to see if everyone is all right. Once left alone, the protagonist takes a moment to process the intense situation. Memories of the underwater rescue flash through her mind as she tries to distinguish fact from fiction. Realizing the intensity of the resuscitation, she covers her mouth in total embarrassment. She hides her face, unable to stop thinking about the moment she was saved. Regaining her composure, she promises to remain vigilant and protect Ailey for the final days of the show. Ailey beams with joy and asks her to watch the celebratory fireworks together after work. The protagonist prepares for her outing by carefully putting on a pair of silver earrings. She takes a final look in the mirror, wearing a designer skirt and a crisp white shirt. Self-doubt starts to creep in as she wonders if the outfit is a bit too bold for her usual style. Despite her nerves, she looks down and tries to compose herself before heading out. She recalls the invitation from Ailey to watch the fireworks together, which motivated her to dress up. Feeling a rush of determination, she decides that looking nice for someone she likes is worth the effort. The scene shifts to a wide view of the bustling waterfront park under the night sky. Ailey waits by the railing, overlooking the water as the crowd gathers. She turns with a bright smile as soon as she hears the protagonist arrive. The protagonist greets her with 2 green tea ice cream cones to enjoy during the show. Ailey immediately notices the effort and compliments her for looking so well dressed. The protagonist finds herself distracted by Ailey's effortless charm and stunning appearance. Holding her ice cream, Ailey asks if there's something on her face after noticing the intense stare. The two stand side by side, sharing a quiet moment as they wait for the main event. Ailey turns serious, asking the protagonist if she is truly doing okay after the recent investigation. She expresses her admiration, telling the protagonist that she is incredibly strong for handling everything. Ailey admits her frustration with the situation, wishing she could have done more to help. They remain focused on each other, even as other visitors pass by on the boardwalk. The conversation turns to the natural resilience people show when facing adversity and harassment. Ailey offers a warm smile, stating that in her heart, the protagonist is the one who is truly courageous. Shocked by the sincere praise, the protagonist can only stare in silence. Suddenly, the first of the fireworks explode above them, lighting up the sky in vibrant colors. Caught up in the magic of the moment, the protagonist finally finds her voice. She begins to confess her feelings, blurting out that she really likes her. The romantic confession is cut short when a group of kids running past slams into her. Disaster strikes as the green tea ice cream splatters all over her expensive white shirt. Furious at the poor timing, the protagonist shouts after the children as they flee. She sighs in defeat, realizing the perfect atmosphere she tried to build is now ruined. The dropped treats lie on the pavement as the kids continue their game in the distance. Ailey stands frozen with a blushing face, having clearly seen what was said. The protagonist suddenly remembers that Ailey is skilled at reading lips, meaning the confession was heard. Panic sets in as she tries to figure out how to recover from the awkward situation. Ailey looks out over the water and admits that she doesn't have much experience with dating. She turns back with a determined look, saying that she is willing to try for the sake of the protagonist's love. Ai makes it official by using the protagonist's full name, signaling a new chapter in their relationship. The protagonist is completely caught off guard by the sudden and direct acceptance of her feelings. She hides her face in her hands, feeling incredibly embarrassed by the use of her name. The two continue to bicker playfully under the continuing fireworks display as the night comes to a close.